the Limelight, and my name is Prince Apollo. Now, the 11th Parliament is once again in the spotlight over the passing of the controversial National Coffee Bill. And questions now arise on regarding the conduct of members of Parliament, but also the process through which some of the legislative work is done in Parliament. We this evening speak to Councillor Dan Wandera Ogalo, a seasoned advocate, but also a former member of Parliament representing Uganda in the Regional Assembly, the East African Legislative Assembly. Welcome to the Limelight this evening, Councillor Ogalo. But straight, let's look at the process through which this bill was passed this week on Wednesday. In your opinion, how can you describe, or how did you generally see this process for this bill which was passed?
I think to understand the process through which the bill was passed, you have, because as you have seen, there have been a lot of disagreements, clashes. It's not been neat. So in order to understand that process, you have to really understand the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Because it is how those two relate which will inform how smooth the process will be. So you have to understand the relationship really. And to do so, you have to look back to history. How has Parliament and how has the executive, in this conversation I'll call it, how has the President and the Parliament emerged up to today? So when you go back to history, you'll find that the first Parliament was there in 1921. But the members were appointed by the governor. The governor is the one who today would be the president.
The equivalent of the president.
The equivalent of the president, thank you. So the first Parliament was appointed by the president. And it was composed of white people and later on Asians, no Africans. They did not have legislative power. They were only to advise the governor. So you can see that both executive and legislative power was fused in the governor, who is the president, who is the equivalent of the president today. The first Africans to enter into that legislative council was in 1946. But even then, the power remained really advisory. The power remained with the executive. It is not until 1958 that we really had a first elected parliament. And the Africans who were elected were only 12 from the Eastern Province, Northern Province, and Western Province. The power still remained with the governor. So we enter into independence in 62 with that scenario. A powerful governor, a very weak legislature, which by that time had just increased a little more power.
The legislature.
So our first parliament, yes, it is there on paper in the constitution. It appears to have a lot of power. But the thinking of the people then is still executive power is superior to legislative power. That has continued for a long time and has been made worse by the fact that between our election was 1960, the next election was 1980. So for even 18 years, there was no parliament. So you must understand that background to understand the weaknesses of our parliament. It is part of it is historical. It is not that the members are just weak as such, but they are operating in this system where they have failed themselves to assert their power. Because on paper, under the Constitution, we have divided the power.
Yes, separation of powers between the executive and the legislature.
But that is on paper. But now, when we come to, let's say, the coffee bill, what does the Constitution say if there is one? First, Parliament passes the bill and sends it to the President to assent.
Yeah.
If the President feels that there are certain things he doesn't agree with, he writes to the Speaker to say, I have a problem with this, I'm suggesting this. The bill comes back to Parliament. Parliament reconsiders it, taking into account the President's views. So it may agree with the views or it might refuse. If it refuses, it passes the law the way it did and sends it back to the President. So if the President stands by his comments and sends it back, Parliament then votes. If by a certain percentage, I don't remember exactly, they still maintain their stand. They overrule the President.
Yeah, it's 2/3 majority.
They overrule the President, and the law becomes, and that bill becomes law by merely the Speaker laying it on table. Unfortunately, Parliament does not realize that power, that it has the power to override the President in the issues of legislation.
Honorable, but this has been different. From the side of the executive, they did not wait. The President did not wait for Parliament to pass it in its own way or reject it. But now, the executive, through the President, directly influenced the process, and the bill was passed.
Yeah, precisely. That's the point I'm making. That's the point I'm making. On paper.
Do you also relate it to the historical weaknesses associated with the Parliament?
Historical weaknesses are just a part of it. Some of it is the President really wanting control and power, wanting to have his way. Because by not waiting Parliament, by not following the Constitution to await Parliament to send to him the bill, what does that tell you? The Constitution says if you have a problem with the coffee bill, wait for it. And when it comes,
you reject it.
You put your comments and send it back to Parliament to reconsider. But he does not follow that. The President does not follow that. That's why I was giving you the history of, in our minds, we have this big chief mentality, the President is everything. So the weakness of Parliament is to fail to tell the President, you have no role at this stage. Wait, when we send you the bill, you'll put your concerns to us. So where is the weakness? The weakness is on two fronts. First weakness is the President wanting to bulldoze his way through, not waiting for the constitutional provisions which tell him what he should do. Then number two, this big chief mentality of members of Parliament thinking that whatever the President says, we must follow. He calls the NRM, caucus, they go there.
But Honorable, is that irregular? Because caucusing is part of our democracy. By the President being the chairman of the ruling party and inviting them for a caucus, they agree on a certain position. Do you find that irregular or unconstitutional anyway?
Look at it from this point of view. Is the President a member of Parliament?
No, he's the head of the executive.
He's head of he's not a member of Parliament. If NRM party members of Parliament want to caucus, can you go there and sit in it?
No.
So what is the President doing in the caucus of members of NRM?
Oh, he's the chair of the party.
No. A caucus is a caucus of parliament. You must distinguish a party from its
Organs.
The president is the chair of the.
Yeah, because the caucus is an organ of the party.
Wait. President is the chair of what do you call it? This thing, the NRM Central Executive Committee.
SEC.
He's the chair, and he's rightly supposed to be there. He's the chairman of the party. That means he chairs the National Delegates Conference. Very rightly to be there. He's not a chair.
So briefly, how can you describe now the current relationship between the executive and the legislature?
That is what brings about weaknesses of parliament. Because a caucus of parliament composed of parliamentarians is allowing a stranger to tell them what to do. If you want to have a strong parliament capable of doing its work, let the caucus do its work as a caucus. The president has areas of intervention. He can intervene at the time when the bill goes before him for assent. He can intervene through the secretary general. He can talk to the whip and say, what do you think about this?
The government chief whip.
Yeah, the government chief whip. But because the members directly tell them go and do this and they also do it, don't come for here.
So summoning the NRM caucus and advising them.
How do you know he was advising them? You are not there. How do you know he never told them go and vote? Okay. They are joking with me, I'll show them.
So in your opinion, what can you now project in the future of this system where we have this relationship where the legislature is weak and the executive is imposing its dominance on...
It is not only the problem of Uganda. That is a problem of most countries which were colonized, because most of them inherited the system I've described. So it is a question of leaders. Do you have leaders who will look at the constitution and how the power is shared and respect it? That's the only way. There is nothing you are going to do if you do not have leaders who would work within the confines of the constitution. When we get to that stage, when we get to the stage where leaders work within the confines, because separation of powers, like you said, what does it mean? It means I have my power, you have your power, judiciary, executive, legislature. None of us should interfere into the power of others. We exercise our power always interlinking with each other. It cannot be absolute separation, but we interlink with each other. But at the end of the day, Parliament, if Parliament starts interfering with the powers of the executive, if the judiciary begins overruling and interfering with the powers of Parliament, that is chaos. So it is a matter which requires leadership willing to subject themselves to the Constitution. The problem is not the Constitution.
Do you think this is a constitutional issue that should be addressed?
No, it's not a constitutional issue. The Constitution is very good. It has already separated everybody within the power.
Then what is it?
Weak leadership. It is a question of weak leadership, incompetent leadership.
From which side?
All of us.
Weakness, I mean, is weakness on the side of the executive or on the side of
all of us?
Of the legislature?
It is all the institutions have got weak leaders. Us as a people, the Constitution tells us the people are sovereign. The power with us. Is the power really with us? We are also weak. So don't just blame the executive, the legislature, judiciary, all the institutions, especially the people. Because it's the people who put those institutions in place. But the people themselves are too weak.
In your opinion, how can this be resolved for all the institutions to regain their power and independence in one or another?
I will repeat. A certain caliber of leaders committed to constitutionalism, committed to the rule of law, are the ones who will change that. No amount of paper, no amount of constitutions they are going to write, no amount of what is going to do is going to balance the powers of the three organs if the leaders are not committed to the principles.
Let's speak about the events that played out in the chambers on Wednesday as the National Coffee Amendment Bill was being passed. Members of Parliament involving in a brawl and exchanging fists, in fist fights over chairs. How can you, describe that?
You know, the English have a saying, the people deserve their leaders. The leaders come from us. It means that's how we are. That's how we ourselves are. So stop jumping and blaming the people fighting for a chair when you ourselves are doing the same. You are the ones who put those ones who fight them. So why do you think you should blame them? They are our representatives. We must accept the things they do. That's what we are. We are trying to put ourselves in a standard above ourselves. We haven't reached there. It is unfortunate because the question of fighting in the parliament, we've had the parliaments before. I served in the parliament of Uganda, in the 6th parliament. It would have been imaginable. Nobody would even have dreamed that you would fight. Why?
That's what I wanted to ask you, Honorable. The issues of decorum have been arising in the last 10, 15 years.
Yes.
And what do you think that tells about the future, governance future of this country?
It bodes bad on the future, because if that's continued, it means we are no longer going to be discussing like I'm discussing with you issues. It means we go back to the law of the young. If you are stronger than me, you beat me up and you take my chair. So be it. It doesn't bode well at all. We should be encouraging discussion. The word parliament comes from the French word parler. It's a place of speaking. So you don't go to parliament to fight. You go to parliament to speak. But again, I must insist that the people deserve their leaders. We can't run away from them. We cannot start abusing them. They represent what we are as a people. We should accept that. When you see police tear gassing and beating up people who are just protesting peacefully, we are essentially a violent country.
Now, Honorable, with the weak institutions, and again, with members of parliament who cannot respect decorum, does that spell chaos or disaster, a crisis?
Well, let's not be very negative. There are rules which try always, whenever we do something wrong, there are always rules to bring us back in line. There are also rules in the parliament to bring parliamentarians back in line when they go wrong. So I would expect that parliament will use its in-house rules to make sure that some punishment, some form of punishment is given to whoever is guilty. That is the only way parliament will be able to stop this kind of conduct. If it can use its rules to discipline itself, by disciplining itself, it will have that decorum back. But if it doesn't, then people will know that after all, it is okay to beat somebody, nothing will happen to you. So it is upon the parliament, the ball is in the parliament.
Honorable, in this particular case, the punishment that was given to the culprits, to the individuals involved in this whole brawl, was a 3 suspension of 3 consecutive sittings. Do you think that can change anything?
I think that one is too weak. I think a suspension of 3 days is weak. It will not deter. The punishment must be such that it deters you from doing it in the future. 3 days not being in the parliament, after all, how many of them attend parliament anyway? That parliament is always empty. So if you suspend me 3 days and in any case I've not been coming, so what? So for me, I think this is a matter which should have been referred to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee would interrogate it and be able to level down a punishment which will ensure that that doesn't happen in the future. As long as your parliament keeps meeting out these weak things, this will continue. So it is upon parliament itself to say, do we want to see ourselves continue this way, or do we want to rein ourselves in and we start looking like a parliament?
Finally, from you, you also said we the voters are actually, these leaders are a reflection of we the voters.
Yes.
What can you tell our people out there, especially voters?
I would tell voters that it is necessary to scrutinize the people you are going to vote for. Basically, you scrutinize, you know them well. Do not be carried away with the sachets of salt, with money, because that is not what a member of parliament should reduce you down to. It should be a question of principles. It's a question of what are you going to do for us. Keep your sachets of salt. I want to know about my health, I want to know about my road, I want to know about this. So it is upon the member of voters also to understand the role of parliament and insist on accountability on rights. But if they want to insist on sugar and salt, they should stop complaining that our parliamentarians are beating each other up. They should stop that.
Finally, from me, Honorable, from what you see, the fight against corruption, all that is going on, because you are talking about bribery during elections, do you see anything changing in the near future? And we have good leaders, credible leaders in offices, and actually representing the voices of the masses?
That one is a tough question. That's a tough question because, frankly, I do not see it in the near future. Maybe long term. But I think the questions of disrespect of the rule of law, which of course corruption is just a subset of it, is so ingredient, it is so interwoven in the national fabric that it's going to take quite some time to unwaver it. It is not an easy thing. I don't see it very simply changing overnight just because you have voted in a new leaders. No. It's now part of us.
Doesn't that mean already we will soon, or in the near future, again see the same scenes that played out on the floor of the House again and again?
Yeah, I agree with you. As long as we do not address the root causes of our problems, and the root causes of our problems it's simple. Rule of law and constitutionalism. What is rule of law? Rule of law, in the simplest terms, is that both the leaders, the rulers, and those who are ruled are subject to the same law. whether if you're a ruler and you have done something against the law, you will be punished as much as somebody who is not being led, who is led. That's the whole thing. But if you were a ruler and you know that I can get away with driving on the wrong side of the road because I'm a big man, that is what is at the bottom of the problem of Uganda.
Thank you so much, Council Dan Wandera Ogaro. Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.
Viewers, a seasoned advocate, but also a former member of Parliament representing Uganda in the East African Legislative Assembly, Honorable Dan Wandera Ogaro. Well, we can wait to see how better this can be handled. He says it's wide, it involves voters and the leaders we elect into power. My name is Prince Apollo. Let's catch up again next Friday, another edition of the Limelight. Good evening, God bless you and God bless Uganda.